In today's video, we're going to be exploring a huge trade potential between the Penguins and the Ducks involving a top goal-scoring winger and a top goaltender to hopefully help both clubs out. Plus, we're going to take a look at the Ottawa Senators' goaltending position. They've also been linked to John Gibson, but other goaltenders on the market, who else could they be looking at as potential targets this offseason? Plus, who do the Montreal Canadiens want to target with their top pick in the 2023 NHL draft? They're likely going to be picking anywhere from that 5-6 spot. Who are they hoping remains available? Plus, we're going to take a look at all of last night's playoff actions and preview tonight's games as well, as we're heading into Game 3s now in the series. All on coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Before we jump into the rumor section of the video, let's first recap last night's playoff action and set up tonight's games. Of course, last night we saw the Maple Leafs lay a beat down on the Lightning to even up that series 1-1. It was kind of reminiscent of last year's series as well. These two teams are battling it out for the second consecutive year in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Last year we saw early both teams lay a beat down on each other with a win with a big margin. So this is not unusual at all. The Leafs ended up winning 7-2. They got a very early power play. I think it was like the first minute or so that the Lightning took a penalty. Mitch Marner scores on it. They got the early momentum, early lead. The fans are into it, and they just continued to go from there. By the end of the period, it was 3-0 Leafs. John Tavares ended up getting a hat trick. Marner had a second goal as well. We've seen their supporting cast in the bottom six chip in a little bit of the offense too. Morgan Riley had, I think, 4 assists. So overall, pretty solid game from the Leafs. Samsonov was better. Just everything that they needed to fix and clean up was better. They didn't look nervous. They didn't look like they were playing on edge like they did in Game 1. And they're going to have to continue to play that way if they want to continue the series this way and try to win. Of course, the series will now shift to Tampa. Tampa, of course, was without Victor Hedman and Eric Chernak. There is a possibility we could see Hedman return in the next game, but unclear yet on Chernak. And, of course, Michael Bunting for Toronto still has 2 games remaining on his suspension. So we'll see how that series goes. The Devils fell again to the Rangers, falling now 2-0. The Rangers have a stranglehold on the series as the series now shifts to MSG. Of course, those two teams are in such close proximity. I don't know if home ice is advantages quite as much as it would be in some cases, but obviously easy for fans to travel to either arena. But at the same time, I'm sure the Rangers are happy to be heading back to their home arena up 2-0. The Devils still continue to look a little bit I don't know how to describe it really, but kind of like the Leafs did in Game 1, like the Devils did in Game 1. Just looked a little bit nervous and just not playing to their style of game at all. Turnovers and just really the Rangers taking advantage of it. The Devils actually scored the first goal on a better first period. We're up 1-0 early. Tarasenko ties it up early in the second. Chris Kreider adds a couple of power play goals later in the period. They end the second up 3-1. Kakko and Kane score in the third to show up a 5-1 victory overall for the second and third periods. The Rangers really were the better team by far, deserved to win that game. I'd be interested to see what changes New Jersey makes, if any, going into the third game. They already made some changes after the first one. We'll see what else they try to get back into the series. The Avalanche were able to even things up with Seattle. The Kraken definitely giving the Avalanche a much tougher time than I think a lot of people anticipated. They pulled off a 3-2 victory. But again, even in this game, after losing Game 1, the Kraken still got off to a 2-0 early lead after the first period. They gave up on a very early goal to Justin Schultz. Brandon Tanev added a goal with about 6.5 minutes to go in the period. And just like that, it's 2-0 Seattle. The Avalanche came out much better in the second. Got some goals from Lehkonen and Nichushkin to tie things up. Devon Taves scores the eventual winning goal with about 7 minutes to go in the third period. So certainly the second and third period is much better for Colorado. And the series is tied, but they'll shift now to Seattle for Game 3. But certainly not the series that Colorado was hoping for. You can definitely tell the injuries and the personnel that's missing is certainly having a big role. And not to give anything lost to Seattle. They played really well. They're certainly getting good goal today from Grubauer at a good time. And also they're a deep team. They've proven this year that they may not have that superstar power like a Makar or McKinnon, but they have it by committee, and they have a really deep group of players that are all pitching in and all contributing. So I think they're having a good experience for their first go-round in the first playoff series. We'll see how this goes as the series shifts now back to Climate Pledge Arena. And Vegas evened up things with the Winnipeg Jets last night with a big 5-2 victory. First period again was all Winnipeg. Jets had a really good start. Got a power play goal from Adam Lowry. Had a 1-0 lead early on, but Vegas woke up in the second, slowly started to take over. They get some goals from guys like Jack Eichel, William Karlsson. Later got a goal from Chandler Stevenson, and a couple goals from Captain Mark Stone, who was one of the better players on the ice last night. Stone certainly looks to be healthy, and certainly looks the best we've seen him in a long time. Got a couple of big goals there for the Golden Knights last night, and they're certainly much better spot. So that series is all even now as it shifts to Winnipeg. So I'll be curious to see here how the Jets respond after that. Now tonight we've got an opportunity where Carolina is going to look to go up 3-0 on the Islanders. The Islanders are definitely going to have, I think, at least one change on the blue line. There's a possibility that Romanov comes back in. Of course, the Canes, we already know they're without Max Pacioretty. They're already without Evgeny Svechnikov. Now they're going to be without Teravainen as well. This team is, obviously winning. They're getting the job done, but at the same time, they are depleted offensively, and the Islanders need a bigger game from Ilya Sorokin, and they need to get some more offense themselves. So obviously, this is going to be a good opportunity for them. First chance to play playoff hockey in UBS Arena. I'm sure they want to put on a good show for their fans and get themselves back in this series. They haven't been completely out of it. Carolina obviously keeps finding ways to pull ahead here, but they've been close games. The Islanders need this one, or it's all but over. Boston and Florida, of course, shifts down to Florida tonight. No Patrice Bergeron. He did not travel with the team. They did say that by the time they get back to Boston for Game 5, that he's pretty likely to be able to play at that point, but we'll have to wait and see. Linus Ullmark, a game-time decision for Boston, is also interesting as well. We might see Jeremy Swayman for the first time in the series. The Bruins have not really had their best games in this series so far. The Game 1, they obviously played well enough to win, but it wasn't their best effort for sure. And in the Game 2 on Wednesday night wasn't the greatest either. So certainly, I think the Panthers are feeling confident right now, and the Bruins need to face this adversity really for the first time this whole season. They've had such a strong year where they just kept winning and winning and winning and winning and winning, that they never really had to go through a big lull. And this is, like I said, even though they're 1-1, they haven't been playing great, and we'll see if they can kind of get things back in order. I have a lot of confidence in the Bruins that they know how to get themselves back in order here. You could say this is like a historic season for Boston. If they don't win the first round series, that's going to be quite a letdown for the Bruins organization and their fans for sure. Dallas and Minnesota, of course, goes back at it tonight in Game 3 as the series shifts to Minnesota. Ryan Hartman and Eriksson Ek are both game-time decisions. Hard to imagine Eriksson Ek is already good to go, or close to it, which is quite remarkable. He would be a big boost for the Wild. Hartman, I believe, the game-time, some are saying it's less likely he's going to play, but we'll have to see. Certainly, it's been, I think Dallas has been by far the better team there. They certainly deserved to win Game 1, but it went to overtime. They lost. Dallas obviously laid more of a thumping on them in Game 2, so we'll see how things go now. The Wild are going back to Gustafsson in between the pipes. Fleury will be out tonight as the backup, so I'll be curious to see if he has a good game, if that impacts their plans at all. And of course, the other game tonight will be the Oilers in LA as they shift their series down to the Los Angeles Arena and see if the Oilers can get back on track. They've certainly had a tough time with this the Kings club, and they're giving them a tough time. Connor McDavid has not been overly productive. Not saying he's playing poorly, but the Kings defense is certainly giving him a hard go, and that's certainly a storyline that we're going to have to continue to watch here for sure. But obviously, Stuart Skinner's been pretty good for Edmonton. Korpisalo has been good for LA, and Leon Draisaitl has been probably one of the best players in this series. So see what the Oilers can do, and if the Kings can continue to give them fits and take a series lead or not. But lots of good, great playoff action going down this evening. Now, when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens in the 2023 NHL draft, of course, we don't know where they're picking yet because the draft lottery hasn't taken place. If it was based on standings alone, they'd be picking number 5 overall. And obviously, if the teams win the lottery, if they're not one of them, then they very well, if their team's ahead of them, they may not move at all in the order. They might stay where they are. But at the same time, you just never know how this is going to go. So I see that clip that's been circulating on social media. I don't know exactly what it's from. It doesn't look like it's from too long ago. It looks like it was before the end of the regular season. So Tony Marinaro, I know, obviously, I think some people have a difference of opinion of him, but for the most part, well-connected guy when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens. He was actually quoting some information from Columbus Blue Jackets writer Aaron Portzline. I'm not sure the story that he would have been quoted from or whatnot, but anyways, he was saying that if the Jackets fall in the draft and they end up picking like around the number 4 spot, because if they don't get a top 2 spot, if they don't win the lottery, they could fall in the draft, right? So they have the second best odds. So right now it would be Anaheim, Columbus. But if Columbus does not win, if Anaheim does not win, they could be bumped down to 3 or 4. So obviously that could happen. He said if Columbus was unfortunate and ended up going to the 4th spot in the draft, that they'd very much likely take American-born player Will Smith. Of course, the top 3 for the most part is pretty much, I want to say guaranteed because we can't say that, but nobody is expecting a different order than obviously Connor Bedard at 1, Adam Fantilli at 2, and Leo Carlsson at 3. I think all scouts that I've seen and rankings all agree they're the top 3 players. But there is Matvei Michkov, who's a wild card in all this, and at one point was considered to be comparable to Bedard. Now, that was a while back. A lot's changed. Bedard's really cemented himself as the top pick. But according to Tony, he says that Aaron Porcelain says that the Jackets, if they fell in the draft, that they would go Will Smith if they can't get one of those top 3 players. But that the Canadians, if they were fortunate enough to move up a little bit, and that's why I said this was obviously recorded before the end of the regular season. But if they were in that 4 or 5 spot and Michkov was there, that they would love to get Michkov. Of course, the co-lead for amateur scouting for Montreal Canadiens, Nick Bobrov, of course, is Russian, has Russian ties. Obviously, quite familiar with the KHL and their players. So certainly I can understand why he would be high on Michkov. And according to Tony, he says that Bobrov refers to Michkov as a Russian Bedard and is extremely high on him. And if the Habs are in a position to draft him, that he would certainly be pushing for that to take place. So I can certainly understand the sentiment there. Michkov looks like a heck of a talent. There's no doubt. Now, one caveat that comes with Michkov, though, he's, I believe, already under contract to stay in the KHL for at least 2 more years. So it'll be like 3 seasons from now, I believe it is, before he could make the jump to North America. So you have to be patient and be willing to wait to get this guy. Now, there's probably no change because there's no transfer agreement between the KHL and NHL. So once you're under contract, you're under contract. The team would be under no obligation to release him from the contract. And for a young, excited player who's going to help them sell tickets and make money, they're certainly not going to do that by any means. So when it comes to the Habs, I mean, if Michkov is on the board and they're picking anywhere around 5, 6, because they're really not going to go for the number 4 spot. Right now, they could be fortunate and they could pick 1 or 2 if they win a lottery spot, because they're obviously in contention for that. So that's a possibility. But otherwise, they're going to be either staying at 5, or they could get bumped down to 6 or 7, depending on what happens on who wins the lottery. If it's teams below them that come up and win, they'll bump them down. If they're teams that are ahead of them already that win those spots, then they're certainly not going to drop any further. So is it possible that Matvei Michkov is available on the draft board when the Habs select, if they do select a 5? It's absolutely possible for sure. I mean, like I said, I suspect we're going to see Bedard, Fantilli, and Carlsson go 1, 2, 3. The number 4 team might be shying away from Russian players. If you just don't know. I know a lot of teams are skeptical of that. They don't want to wait a really long time for them to come over, or they're concerned that they won't come over at all. So there is a very much real perception out there, and some teams are skeptical of it. There's no doubt. I can see some teams in the number 4 spot passing on him, and some won't care. That they think he's the best player, they're going to take him. And he's no guaranteed to be there for the Habs. But interesting to note on obviously one of the recent hires here by the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, Bobrov was hired this past summer. It was announced the same time when they announced that Vincent Lecavalier was going to be doing some work with the Canadiens as well. So certainly an interesting take. I know it's somebody they probably would rely on heavily for an opinion on some of these players, especially Michkov. So be curious to see if he is there, if that's the route that Montreal goes down. Onto the trade section of the video, though. Ottawa Senators, we know, are going to be looking for goaltending help. They're not bringing back Cam Talbot. Anton Forsberg will be one of the goalies. It could be Mads Søgaard, the youngster who didn't do too badly and has decent amount of appearances he had to make this year. But, of course, that was kind of due to necessity on injuries. And I think he did good considering. But I think it would be wise and, great if they could give him another year to kind of spend in the American League and continue developing before he's ready for a full-time spot. To have a veteran goaltender come in as a stopgap in between would be wise. Especially if they want to make sure they have the best chance possible to get into the playoffs next year. So a recent article from Bruce Giriok and the Ottawa Sun exploring some options. I know one of the names we're going to talk about here in a moment is John Gibson, and we did talk in the last couple of days about Gibson being linked to the Senators, because Bruce does take a look at Gibson as an option for trade. But to be honest, I'm not entirely convinced from an Ottawa perspective that he's the solution. For one, you're going to have to give up a decent price tag to get him, which I'm not sure what the Ducks are going to want. So there's that thing. That's obviously going to play a big role here in their decisions. Secondly, his contract. He's got 4 more years over almost just shy of $6.5 million. You already got to sign or try to sign Alex DeBrincat. You have some other guys that are going to need new contracts like Sanderson and Pinto soon. You have to manage your cap appropriately, and depending on, it would have to be a decent amount of, like a good size contract going out to trade for Gibson. I don't know if the Senators really want to subtract much of anything from their roster to make a move like this. So they might be more inclined to go for a player that's going to be less expensive or by free agency. So obviously some other options that Giriok mentions would be Yoris Korpisalo in Los Angeles, Tristan Jarry in Pittsburgh as a UFA, Freddie Anderson in Carolina. But again, it's difficult to see any of those guys as really being the true solution. I don't know if Ottawa really wants to go down the road of getting another former Penguin goaltender. Of course, the Matt Murray experiment did not go well, so I don't know if they want to go down that road again. So there's that, and Jerry struggled with injuries and consistency. Freddie Anderson's going to be like 34 years old. Didn't have a bad year in Carolina, but not the great. Like, you could tell I think it's fair to say he did decline a little bit. And of course, he wasn't selected as a starter by the Canes in Game 1 of the playoffs. Certainly, they don't see him as being their number one right now. So that raises some questions. Korpisalo in LA, probably the best option amongst all the other names besides Gibson out there. But I really, looking at the scenario here, I think there's a really good chance that LA will re-sign him. As long as he's happy there, I think they'll be happy with him, with how he's played. I would not be shocked at all to sort of see Korpisalo stay in Los Angeles, which is going to make things very difficult for the Sens. Like I said, there's not a lot of trade options, at least as of right now, on the market. To me, if he's available, and we don't know the answer yet because it was not mentioned in this article, I think they should target a guy like Carter Hart in Philadelphia. But again, the price to acquire him is going to be complicated. Now, if his contract works a lot better for a cap purpose for the next couple of years, based on what the Sens have going on, but the Flyers are going to want a lot to get him out of there, and I don't know that they're going to want to go down that road. So that's the big question here. They pulled off a lot of trades lately. They pulled off, some good names like DeBrincat and Chychrun, and they haven't really given up anything off the roster, and they're getting to a point to continue doing any kind of moves like that they're not going to have much choice. So we'll see what happens, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. It could be see a big trade between the Ducks and the Penguins. There's an article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette suggesting the Penguins trade for Gibson, referring to him as a franchise goaltender and a guy who can come in and really stabilize things for Pittsburgh. And they suggest that they let Tristan Jarry go as a UFA, trade for Gibson, even if they have to trade a scoring winger like Brian Rust or Jake Gensel. That I found very interesting. Jake Gensel, of course, has 2 more years left in his contract. They just signed Rust last offseason to a longer term. I think it was a 6-7 year deal worth $5 million. So Rust is there for the long haul, a lot more term. He's a little bit older than Gensel. I don't know that he really fits with the Ducks roster. Now, if Anaheim gets Connor Bedard, are they going to want to trade Gibson too? There's also that, because to me, if they get Connor Bedard, I can see Pat Verbeek maybe going about things a little bit differently and trying to make that team better, faster. They're not going to accomplish that by trading their goaltender. They don't really have a lot in the organization. They do have Lucas Dostal, who's capable of eventually taking over, and that could happen as early as next year if he needed to. But I think they're going to want a veteran with him for a little while to kind of get him a little bit more established. So I don't know that we're going to see that if that happens. But should the Penguins bring Gibson to their organization? Should they be trying? Should they offer Jake Gensel, his 35 to 40 goal scorer pretty consistently, an important line mate of Sidney Crosby's a lot of the time? That would be tricky to do. Yes, they would be getting stronger in one area, but would it be weakened in another? Would it really be worth it? I don't know. I mean, Gensel's 28, 2 years left on his contract. I think if the Ducks were going to do that deal, I think they would ask for Gensel over Rust. But again, based on all their young players that they've been gathering there, does that make sense for them to do? I don't know that it really does. Now, Gibson is, I believe, from the Pennsylvania area, so obviously that would be like a homecoming type of deal. So I understand the connection there. Could he be a better goaltender than he's shown? Yes, I think he could be. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But if I'm Pittsburgh, I don't know if I'm trading Gensel for Gibson. But let me know what your thoughts based on this article. Is that something Pittsburgh should do? What should they do to really solidify goaltending going into next year? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.